Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Have you ever moved? Whether you were thrilled to move, or it felt like the universe pushed you out the door, moving can change so much. Today we're diving into a fascinating study that asks, does how you feel about your move, meaning whether it was voluntary or forced, actually change your happiness and how you get around? This is the big question researchers Dario Stolze, Felix Wilhelm Siebert, and Sonja Haustein explored. They figured that if you choose to move, you are likely to end up somewhere that fits your life, boosting your well-being. But if you are forced to move, you might end up somewhere less ideal, making you less happy and changing your daily travel in ways you didn't want. Think about it, if you have control, you'll probably pick a place that makes your commute easier or a neighborhood that you actually like. If you don't have control, well, you might just have to deal with whatever you get. So how did they investigate this? They used data from Denmark, tracking people over time. They followed individuals who expected to move and then later actually moved. They designed this like a natural experiment, meaning they observed something that happened in real life without interfering, trying to see if the type of move had different effects. They used different surveys at different times to see how people felt before and after they moved. They also collected a lot of information about people's lives, like their satisfaction, mental health, and how they traveled. The core idea here is moving voluntariness, which they defined as the degree to which individuals perceive a future move to be desirable and under their own control. This is super important because most studies look at whether you objectively had to move, like if you were evicted. But this study focused on your feeling of control and desire. Did you want to move? Did you feel like it was your choice? Based on this, they made some hypotheses. They predicted that people who felt forced to move would end up less happy, less satisfied with where they lived, less attached to their new place, and feel less in control of their lives. On the flip side, they expected voluntary movers to have better outcomes. They also looked at travel. If you move to a new place, it might change how you travel. They thought voluntary movers, having chosen their spot, would have travel habits that match what they liked or wanted. Involuntary movers might be stuck with travel behaviors that don't fit their preferences. Now, for the results, when they looked at well-being, things got interesting. For life satisfaction, voluntary movers did show small improvements after moving. But here is the kicker. Involuntary movers didn't show a decrease in well-being. They actually showed slight, non-significant improvements too. Residential satisfaction saw a boost for voluntary movers, but involuntary movers, who were actually more satisfied with their old place before moving, didn't change significantly after moving place. Attachment, that feeling of connection to a place, also increased for voluntary movers. Mental health scores improved slightly for both groups. Environmental mastery, that feeling of being in charge of your life, didn't change for anyone. However, there was a notable difference before the move and continuing after the move in environmental mastery. Voluntary movers consistently felt more in control of their living situations than involuntary movers. Even before they moved, this suggests that maybe people who already feel more in control are more likely to see a move as voluntary. What about travel? Travel behavior itself didn't really change for either group, no matter the mode like cars, bikes, or public transport. This was a bit surprising, but they did find that involuntary movers had weaker car orientations and lower mobility needs fulfillment, meaning they felt less need for a car and their travel needs were less met. Voluntary movers, on the other hand, tended to have higher car usage and a stronger car dependence. Interesting, even though their neighborhoods became descriptively less car-friendly, after moving for both groups, involuntary movers actually showed slightly increased car attitudes after the move. So their hypotheses about travel behavior didn't quite pan out. They didn't find that voluntary movers had a better match between their travel attitudes and actual behavior, or that involuntary movers had a worse match. The link between expecting to travel a certain way and actually doing it in the new place wasn't clearly different between the two groups. What does this all mean? The researchers concluded that while voluntary movers did see some improvements in well-being, especially when it came to residential satisfaction and place attachment, the forced movers didn't get worse. This might suggest that moving, even if forced, can sometimes lead to objective improvements that buffer negative feelings. It might be a case of something called cognitive dissonance. When you go through a big change like moving, you might convince yourself you like your new situation better to justify the effort and stress. The biggest surprise was in travel behavior. The study's main idea that the voluntariness of a move would lead to different travel outcomes wasn't strongly supported. It seems like feeling more or less in control of your move doesn't automatically translate into whether your travel preferences are met in your new home. The researchers point out that perhaps their definition of moving voluntariness was too broad. They suggest that maybe we need to look at the voluntariness of different parts of the move, like choosing a new job versus choosing a new neighborhood. They also noted that for all movers, their attachment to their new place after moving was lower than people who stayed put. This makes sense. Building a real connection to a place takes time. And for involuntary movers, their lower mobility needs fulfillment and weaker car orientation, especially when compared to voluntary movers. Suggests there might be inequalities in how moves affect people's ability to get around and meet their daily needs. Now, for the limitations, the number of involuntary movers they studied was quite small, which can make it harder to draw firm conclusions about them. Also, their sampling method might have missed people who experienced very sudden, forced moves, like those due to emergencies. Going forward, these researchers encourage more studies to look at this moving voluntariness. They think we need to better understand how our feelings of control and desire about moving affect our lives. Future research could explore if certain personality traits, like how open you are to change, play a role in whether you perceive a move as voluntary. They also suggest looking at specific aspects of the move, like the housing search, to see if that impacts travel behavior more directly. And perhaps using more detailed methods like smartphone diaries could capture travel changes in a finer-grained way. So, what is my take on this? It is a really well-designed study that brings up fascinating points about how our perception of control can influence our well-being, even in big life events like moving. The fact that involuntary movers didn't experience worse well-being is a strong signal that people are resilient, and maybe we're all better at adapting and finding positives than we think, especially after putting so much effort into a move. However, the lack of clear differences in travel behavior is a bit of a puzzle. It hints that maybe the choices we make about where to live aren't always as driven by our travel preferences as we might assume, or that other factors like job location and the actual built environment play a more dominant role, regardless of how we felt about the move itself. This study is a great starting point for understanding the nuanced psychological impact of residential relocation and opens up important questions about how we choose where to live and how that journey affects us. What are your thoughts on moving and control? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a like and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology and science. Thanks for watching.